Most people think a man-child is simply someone who refuses to grow up. But psychology reveals something far more unsettling. The man-child isn't created overnight. He is often shaped by hidden emotional patterns, unresolved childhood wounds, and habits that quietly keep him trapped in the body of an adult while thinking like a child. The most dangerous part is that many people don't recognize these patterns until they begin destroying their relationships, careers, and sense of purpose. Watch this video until the end, because we're going to uncover the hidden psychology behind the man-child, why some men never develop emotional maturity, what childhood experiences silently shape this behavior, and how these patterns affect love, success, confidence, and every important relationship in their lives. By the end of this video, you won't just understand the psychology of the man-child, you may recognize these hidden patterns in someone you know, or even discover a part of yourself that has been quietly holding you back for years. Have you ever felt like life was passing right in front of your eyes and you weren't doing a thing about it? Waking up late, scrolling on your phone, playing one more game, watching one more video, telling yourself, I'll start in a little bit, but that little bit never comes. And by the end of the day, you're lying there again with that same familiar question. What the heck am I doing with my life? Most people call this laziness. They'll tell you to be more disciplined, to manage your time better. But the truth is, your problem has nothing to do with time management skills. What's holding you back is not laziness. It's a very deep part of your mind quietly avoiding growing up. And what's the scariest part? A lot of men don't grow out of this in their 20s. They carry it into their 30s, 40s, 50s, even their 60s. On the outside, they still look like adults, but on the inside, there is a very childish part of them that panics every time life asks them to take responsibility. Welcome back to Apex. Today, we're going to step into the psychology of the man-child. Before we begin, I need to say this up front. This video may not be easy to hear. It might make you uncomfortable, maybe even hit your ego a little, but if you can stay calm enough to listen until the end, this might be the exact wake-up call you need to truly snap out of it. So, what exactly is this childish part? And what form is it hiding inside you? Let's start by dissecting its psychology. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung used a Latin term por eris to describe the state. It means the eternal boy. In everyday life, we know it by names like Peter Pan syndrome or the man-child. When you are caught in this syndrome, it does not mean you are unintelligent or incapable. In fact, you are often someone with a lot of ideas and sharp instincts. However, your biggest trait in this state is an extreme desire for absolute freedom. In this state, freedom seems to mean not being tied down by anything, not being responsible for anyone, and not having to make any fixed choices. You want to keep yourself in a place where every door stays open, but you never actually walk through any of them. Carl Jung described your life with a very accurate phrase, the provisional life. Living a provisional life means you always feel like what you are doing right now is not your real life. You work an office job, but you tell yourself it is only a temporary job to make a living, while deep down you are actually an undiscovered genius waiting for your moment. You live in a messy room, but you think there is no need to clean it, because this is only a temporary place. And one day you will have a real home. You date someone, but deep inside you always think this is not the most perfect person for you, and you are only in a temporary relationship. Because you think everything is temporary, you never put your full heart and effort into anything. You live like a spectator sitting in the stands watching your own life pass by. You watch the people around you throw themselves into life. They work, they fail, they move up, they get married. Your mind looks at them and unconsciously creates the feeling that you are somehow above them. The ego of the child inside you tells itself that they are trapped in the rat race of bills and daily survival, while you are just waiting for a more special path. But the truth is, you choose to be a spectator not because you are free, but because you are using that freedom as a shield. When you do not choose a specific career, you can proudly tell yourself that you have the potential to do anything. When you never truly give your all to any goal, you never have to face the feeling of failure. You keep all your dreams as perfect ideas in your head, because a dream that has never been tested has never had the chance to fail. The deepest hidden fear behind your careless attitude is the fear of reality. Everyday reality always comes with harsh rules. Reality has bills to pay, rejection, competition, and flaws. In that safe imaginary world, you are a star. But when you step into reality, you have to accept that you are starting from zero. You have to learn, you have to work, and you have to take responsibility for your mistakes. A part of you would rather cling to a safe provisional life than step onto the field and accept the risk of getting hurt. So where did this chronic procrastination and fear of growing up actually come from? Why do you choose to trap yourself inside the cocoon of childhood instead of stepping out into the world? To answer that, we need to flip back through the pages of the past. Marie-Louise von France, a close colleague of Carl Jung, pointed out a surprising truth. Most man-children when they were young were actually very gifted kids. Maybe as a child you were the smartest kid in class, someone who learned everything quickly without much effort, or someone with a special talent in a certain area. You received tons of praise from your parents and teachers. You were labeled as a special child or a future genius. These early compliments accidentally created a dangerous psychological trap. You began to build your entire sense of self-worth around being outstanding and full of great potential. You believed you were different from the rest of the world. However, the tragedy begins when you enter adulthood and have to face real society. In the school of life, potential is no longer something that gets rewarded. The real world only recognizes results and persistence. When you start a new job or a new project, you cannot be great right away. You will make mistakes, you will be rejected, and you will see that there are many other people who are better than you. For someone who grew up believing they were special, these experiences feel like a direct threat to your ego. The feeling that you are not good enough, the feeling of being rejected, hurts deeply. And to protect that wounded ego, your mind activates an automatic defense mechanism. That mechanism is procrastination. You start telling yourself, I have not succeeded only because I have not truly started taking things seriously yet, not because I am not good enough. When you delay applying for jobs, delay writing that book, delay learning a new skill, what you are really doing is protecting the illusion of your own ability. As long as you have not started, you still have the right to believe that if you did start, you would definitely become the best. At this point, procrastination is not simply laziness. It is a psychological strategy that helps you avoid facing your actual level of ability. Look at the story of Icarus in mythology. He was given a pair of wax wings to escape from the island where he was trapped. But he refused to respect the limits. He flew too high, too close to the sun, because he thought he was untouchable until the heat melted the wax and he fell into the sea. You are the image of Icarus when you confuse potential with real achievement. You can dream about flying very high in the wonderful plans you create for yourself. But if you have not learned how to walk steadily on the ground, if you have not trained yourself through even the smallest tasks, you will be very easily shattered when you touch reality. And when the gap between fantasy and reality keeps getting bigger, people can easily fall into a self-destructive spiral with 3 familiar psychological traps of the eternal child. Trap 1, constantly looking for tools to numb your awareness. It is easy to understand why we want comfort after a tiring day. But the problem lies in how you use it. Every time you face the pressure of life or the fear of failure, Your familiar reaction is not to solve the problem, but to find a quick escape so you do not have to feel that discomfort. You dive into gaming all night, scroll through short videos aimlessly on your phone, sink into toxic pleasures on the internet, or chase short-term stimulation for you. This is not normal entertainment. It is a psychological anesthetic that helps you temporarily forget the reality that you are standing still. In the virtual world of a game, you can be a successful hero, but when you turn off the screen, you return to an empty reality. You are using these short-term pleasures to escape the alarm bell of your own life. Trap 2. Being extremely afraid of long-term commitment. In the early stage, when everything is still new and fun, you are very enthusiastic. But as soon as the relationship starts asking for responsibility, promises about the future, or financial sharing, you immediately feel trapped. You begin to exaggerate the other person's small flaws, focus on everything that is not perfect, or use your circumstances as a reasonable excuse to slowly pull away. On a deeper level, you may unconsciously be drawn to someone who takes care of you too much, and then slowly place on them the role of carrying your emotions and responsibilities for you. Over time, they have to carry too much from cleaning and money to major decisions, while you stay stuck in the role of the person being taken care of, rather than someone who carries the weight with them. Trap 3. Victim mentality and the habit of blaming others. The eternal child syndrome can easily pull you into a victim mindset where every outside pressure is seen as proof that the world is against you. This is like the story of Peter Pan, who always sees the adult Captain Hook as the evil enemy. In real life, Captain Hook represents your boss, the rules of society, and the ticking clock of time that is pushing you to grow up. Instead of allowing your mind to accept the reality that you need more effort and discipline, this syndrome tricks you into seeing all of those pressures as unfair. Yes, the economy can be difficult, the job market can be harsh, and society is not always fair. But the trap is this. If you use those things as the only reason not to act, you accidentally hand over full control of your life to your circumstances. This mechanism keeps you stuck in the land of avoidance where you feel protected. But in reality, you are slowly losing your ability to take responsibility for your own life. But you know what? Recognizing these 3 traps is not about beating yourself up and calling yourself a failure. Recognizing them is about understanding your invisible enemy. And knowing this, you have the power to change it starting today. If you saw yourself in the parts we just went through, what you need right now is not to sink into guilt. Guilt can make you blame yourself, but it does not necessarily make you grow up. What you need are the real actions of an adult. There are 4 steps to step out of the cocoon. Step 1, completely change the way you think about growing up. One of the biggest misunderstandings of the eternal child state is the belief that growing up, making money, and carrying responsibility will turn them into someone ordinary, kill their creativity, and erase the dreams and ambitions of their youth. They see adulthood as a prison. But the truth is the exact opposite. You need to understand that responsibility and commitment are not chains. They are the strongest protective walls for your dreams. Just imagine this. If someone has a talent for writing but does not have the discipline to sit down at the desk every day, that talent will disappear into nothing. If someone has a brilliant business idea but is afraid of risk and refuses to learn how to manage money, that idea will stay on paper forever. Growing up does not kill the creative child inside you. It gives that child a structure, a solid foundation, so ideas can become real in the real world. Step 2, bravely embrace being ordinary. The psychology of the eternal child often makes you look down on normal tasks and daily routines because they seem too small compared to the special image you once believed about yourself. To break this mechanism, you have to start doing those small and boring things with the greatest seriousness. Start by cleaning your own room, washing and folding your own clothes neatly, and try doing it in silence without using music or your phone to pull your attention somewhere else. Focus completely on the action itself. Pay your own electric and water bills on time. Take a normal job, whether it is physical work or a low-paying office job, and try to do it as well as you can. When you allow yourself to do these ordinary things seriously, you are pulling your mind down from the clouds and back to the ground. You are directly interacting with reality and realizing that the world does not stop just because you are avoiding it or because you are not ready. Step 3. Practice exposure therapy with failure. Because the core fear of this state is the fear that you are not good enough. The way to overcome it is not to avoid failure forever, but to slowly expose yourself to situations where real failure is possible. Choose one thing you have been putting off for a long time simply because you were afraid you would not do it well. It might be finishing your resume and sending it to 5 different companies. It might be signing up for a new skills course where you accept that you may be clumsy at the beginning. It might be apologizing to someone you hurt or asking your boss directly for honest feedback about your ability. When you do this, you will see that failure is not as terrifying as you imagined. Being rejected does not mean your life is over. A man's character is not formed when he always wins in his imagination. It is shaped and strengthened through the times he falls in real life, then gets back up by himself, brushes the dust off his knees, and keeps going. Step 4. Find an outside structure that holds you accountable. One very strong tendency of the eternal child is constantly negotiating with himself to avoid discomfort. When things get hard, your mind can easily come up with hundreds of reasons that sound reasonable just so you can delay, rest a little longer, or crawl back into your soft bed with your phone. That is why, in the beginning, you cannot fully rely on your own willpower. You need to find a mentor, a teacher, a strict boss, or a community of highly disciplined men. Find people who are honest enough to point out when you are making excuses, serious enough not to pamper your procrastination, and demanding enough to expect you to finish what you promised. The pressure of a disciplined environment and the supervision of the people around you will be what keeps your feet on the ground whenever the child inside you wants to fly back into the fantasy world. These 4 steps are not easy, but they are a very practical path for you to start pulling yourself back into real life. Do not let your potential stay forever. In the words, almost. Do not wait until the end of your life, look back, and have nothing but regret. The difference between a person with real achievements and a person forever trapped in potential is not natural talent. It is whether you dare to step out of the imaginary world and face the scratches of reality. There may be no magical moment that pulls you out of that room. There is also no magic that will turn you into a successful person overnight if you keep letting each day pass unconsciously in front of a screen. Maybe you have lived too long on the surface of life, inside a feeling of safety that seems comfortable but has been quietly trapping you. Now it is time to step into the deep waters of reality. And before we close today's video, think carefully about a quote from Carl Jung. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. If you keep avoiding life and living temporarily today, what you lose is not just time. Little by little, that helplessness and regret can accidentally become something you carry into love, family, friendship, and even the way you treat the next generation. If you sit with Jung's words for a moment, you begin to realize they point towards something much deeper than family expectations. Every generation passes down more than money, traditions, or beliefs. It also passes down unfinished emotional patterns. A father who never learned how to express his emotions may unknowingly teach his son that vulnerability is weakness. A mother who constantly rescued her child from every difficulty may unintentionally prevent him from discovering his own strength. Without realizing it, many man-children are not simply avoiding adulthood. They are repeating psychological patterns that existed long before they were born. Modern psychology refers to this as intergenerational transmission. Human beings do not only inherit eye color or physical traits. They often inherit emotional habits, coping mechanisms, and unconscious beliefs about responsibility, success, relationships, and failure. This does not mean your future is predetermined. It simply means that unless these patterns become conscious, they continue directing your life from behind the scenes. Awareness is the first step toward freedom because you cannot change a pattern you cannot see. Think about how often you automatically react when life becomes uncomfortable. Do you postpone difficult conversations? Do you distract yourself the moment anxiety appears? Do you convince yourself that tomorrow will somehow feel different without changing anything today? These reactions usually happen so quickly that they feel like personality. In reality, they are often learned survival strategies that your nervous system has practiced for years. The longer they remain automatic, the more they shape the direction of your life without your permission. One of the greatest myths surrounding maturity is that it arrives naturally with age. But psychologists have long understood that growing older and growing up are two completely different processes. Time changes your appearance. Experience changes your character, but only if you are willing to learn from it. A person can spend 40 years repeating the same emotional habits and mistakenly call it experience. Another person may spend only a few difficult years intentionally confronting fear, accepting responsibility, and reflecting honestly on mistakes, and emerge with remarkable psychological maturity. This is why responsibility has such extraordinary power. It does far more than solve practical problems. Responsibility reorganizes the mind itself. Every promise you keep strengthens your confidence. Every difficult conversation you choose to have, instead of avoiding, teaches your brain that discomfort is survivable. Every commitment you honor quietly rewires your identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who constantly delays action, you slowly begin seeing yourself as someone who follows through, even when motivation disappears. Neuroscience supports this transformation. The brain changes according to repeated behavior, a process known as neuroplasticity. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, action over avoidance, or responsibility over excuses, you strengthen neural pathways associated with self-control and long-term thinking. At first, these choices feel unnatural because the brain prefers familiar habits. But repetition slowly makes responsibility feel less like effort and more like identity. Eventually, you are no longer forcing yourself to act like an adult. You simply become one through consistent practice. Another important realization begins to emerge. Many people believe confidence comes before action. They wait to feel ready before taking the first step. But psychological research consistently points in the opposite direction. Confidence is often the result of action, not the cause of it. The man-child waits until fear disappears. The mature adult understands that fear rarely disappears before action. Instead, courage grows each time action is taken despite uncertainty. Every completed task, every promise kept, every uncomfortable responsibility accepted becomes evidence that the mind can handle more than it once believed. Slowly, life begins to feel different. Problems that once seemed overwhelming become manageable. Responsibilities that once felt like heavy chains begin feeling like proof of personal strength. Even failure starts carrying a different meaning. Instead of seeing mistakes as evidence that they are not capable, they begin viewing them as information. Each setback becomes feedback rather than a verdict on their worth. This shift is one of the clearest signs that emotional maturity is taking root. Perhaps the most surprising transformation happens in the relationship they have with freedom itself. Earlier, freedom meant avoiding commitments, keeping every option open, and escaping anything that felt restrictive. But now they discover a deeper kind of freedom. They realize that real freedom is waking up, knowing you can trust yourself. It is having the discipline to pursue meaningful goals, the emotional strength to face uncomfortable truths, and the resilience to continue moving forward when life refuses to go according to plan. That kind of freedom cannot be given by parents, friends, or society. It has to be built decision by decision, responsibility by responsibility, until the child who once feared reality gradually becomes the adult who is capable of shaping it. As this transformation continues, another psychological shift quietly takes place. They begin separating comfort from fulfillment. For most of their lives, these two ideas felt identical. If something felt comfortable, it must have been good. If something felt difficult, it must have been wrong. But adulthood repeatedly teaches the opposite lesson. Some of the most meaningful experiences in life begin with discomfort. Building a healthy relationship requires uncomfortable honesty. Developing discipline requires uncomfortable consistency. Pursuing purpose often demands uncomfortable sacrifice. The mature mind gradually learns that temporary discomfort is often the entrance fee to long-term fulfillment. This realization fundamentally changes how they interpret their emotions. Instead of asking, "How can I avoid feeling uncomfortable?" they begin asking, "What is this discomfort trying to teach me?" That question alone shifts the brain from avoidance into curiosity. Anxiety before a difficult conversation may not be a signal to escape. It may simply be evidence that something important is about to happen. Fear before accepting greater responsibility may not mean you are incapable. It may simply mean you are standing at the edge of growth. Emotional maturity is not the absence of uncomfortable emotions. It is the ability to experience them without allowing them to control every decision. There is another invisible habit that slowly begins disappearing: the need to constantly blame circumstances. Earlier in life, every setback seemed to have an external explanation. The boss was unfair, the economy was difficult, relationships failed because other people did not understand them. While external factors certainly influence our lives, mature individuals eventually recognize a deeper psychological principle. Between what happens to us and how we respond lies a space where responsibility begins. They may not control every event, but they always have influence over the meaning they assign to those events and the actions they choose afterward. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as developing an internal locus of control. People with an external locus of control believe their future is largely determined by luck, other people, or circumstances beyond their influence. Those with an internal locus of control recognize that while life is often unpredictable, their choices still matter. This belief changes behavior in powerful ways. Instead of waiting for motivation, they create routines. Instead of waiting for confidence, they practice. Instead of waiting for rescue, they begin building the life they hope someone else would one day provide. Interestingly, this also transforms the way they experience failure. Earlier, failure felt deeply personal. A mistake was interpreted as proof that they were not good enough, intelligent enough, or capable enough. That interpretation naturally led to avoidance, because protecting their self-image became more important than learning. But as psychological maturity develops, failure gradually loses its power to define identity. It becomes information rather than condemnation. Every setback reveals a weakness that can be strengthened, a skill that can be developed, or an assumption that needs to be questioned. This growth is especially noticeable in relationships. The emotionally immature man often enters relationships hoping someone else will complete him, stabilize him, or heal wounds he has never confronted himself. He unconsciously expects a partner to become a substitute parent, constantly providing reassurance, emotional regulation, and direction. At first, this dependency can be mistaken for love because it appears affectionate and deeply attached. Yet beneath the surface, it often reflects an inability to stand emotionally on his own. Healthy love is built between two emotionally responsible individuals. Dependency, however, quietly places the impossible burden of one person's inner stability onto another. Over time, those who choose maturity begin relating to others from a completely different place. They no longer seek relationships to escape loneliness or avoid themselves. Instead, they enter them as whole individuals who are capable of giving as much as they receive. They learn to apologize without becoming defensive. They communicate frustration without resorting to emotional withdrawal. They take ownership of their mistakes instead of searching for someone else to blame. These changes may seem ordinary from the outside, but psychologically, they represent a profound shift from emotional dependence to emotional responsibility. Perhaps one of the clearest signs of this transformation appears in the way they think about the future. The man-child often imagines that life will somehow improve on its own. He assumes tomorrow will magically provide the motivation that is missing today. The mature adult understands something far more powerful. The future is quietly being built by the small decisions made in ordinary moments. Every morning routine, every promise honored, every temptation resisted, every difficult conversation accepted becomes a brick in the foundation of the person they are becoming. Rather than searching for a dramatic breakthrough, they begin trusting the extraordinary power of consistent, almost invisible progress. Another subtle transformation begins to emerge that many people never expect. The more responsibility they accept, the less they feel controlled by their emotions. Earlier in life, every decision depended on how they felt in the moment. If they felt motivated, they worked. If they felt tired, they postponed. If they felt anxious, they escaped into distraction. Their emotional state acted like a manager, giving orders that they rarely questioned. But adulthood teaches a completely different psychological principle. Feelings are important, but they are not always reliable leaders. Sometimes they simply reflect your current comfort level rather than your long-term interests. This distinction is one of the greatest turning points in emotional development. Mature people still experience fear, boredom, frustration, and self-doubt. The difference is that they stop treating these emotions as instructions. They begin viewing them as temporary internal experiences rather than permanent truths. A difficult morning no longer convinces them that the entire week is ruined. A single mistake no longer convinces them they are incapable. Emotional storms still arrive, but they no longer allow those storms to determine the direction of their lives. This ability is closely connected to what psychologists call delayed gratification. Decades of behavioral research have shown that individuals who consistently choose meaningful long-term rewards over immediate pleasure often experience greater success across many areas of life. But delayed gratification is frequently misunderstood. It is not about constantly denying yourself enjoyment. It is about learning to distinguish between pleasure that strengthens your future and pleasure that quietly steals it. Watching a movie after completing meaningful work feels completely different from watching one to avoid facing responsibilities you know are waiting for you. The eternal child often struggles with this distinction because his mind naturally seeks immediate emotional relief. Every uncomfortable responsibility creates tension, and every distraction promises instant comfort. Over time, this pattern trains the brain to expect quick rewards whenever discomfort appears. Unfortunately, the nervous system learns exactly what it repeatedly practices. The more often someone's escape discomfort, the less capable they become of tolerating it. Eventually, even small responsibilities begin feeling overwhelming, not because they actually are, but because emotional endurance has never been developed. This explains why seemingly simple adult tasks can feel surprisingly exhausting for someone trapped in this mindset. Filling out paperwork, organizing finances, scheduling appointments, maintaining healthy routines, or consistently showing up for work may appear ordinary to others. Yet each responsibility represents another reminder that life cannot be lived entirely according to impulse. The child inside resists these routines because they feel restrictive. The adult eventually recognizes that routines are not limitations. They are systems that reduce chaos and create stability. As this understanding deepens, another psychological change quietly unfolds. They stop chasing constant excitement. Earlier, ordinary life always seemed disappointing. Daily routines felt boring compared to the exciting future they imagined for themselves. They believed happiness would arrive through dramatic opportunities, extraordinary success, or sudden breakthroughs. But over time, they discover something unexpected. A meaningful life is built far more often through ordinary days than extraordinary moments. Preparing healthy meals, exercising consistently, honoring commitments, learning new skills, spending quality time with loved ones. These repetitive actions rarely feel exciting in the moment, yet they gradually create a life that feels deeply satisfying. Interestingly, many successful individuals describe this exact shift. They no longer rely on inspiration to begin working. Instead, they build habits that make progress almost automatic. Psychologists often describe habits as decisions that no longer require constant willpower. The more often a behavior is repeated in the same context, the less mental energy it demands. This is why disciplined people sometimes appear highly motivated when, in reality, they simply rely less on motivation altogether. Their environment, routines, and identity quietly support the behaviors they want to maintain. Another important realization begins to take shape. The eternal child often believes that choosing one path means losing every other possibility. This fear creates endless hesitation because every commitment feels like a permanent sacrifice. Yet mature adults slowly recognize an unavoidable truth about life. Every meaningful choice closes certain doors while opening others. Saying yes to one career means saying no to countless alternatives. Choosing one partner means letting go of every other romantic possibility. Becoming a responsible parent means sacrificing freedoms that once felt essential. These losses are not evidence that life is becoming smaller. They are evidence that life is becoming focused. Paradoxically, it is this focus that allows genuine freedom to emerge. A scattered mind endlessly imagines possibilities but rarely experiences fulfillment. A committed mind may have fewer options, but it gains depth, mastery, and purpose. Instead of constantly wondering what might have been, it begins investing fully in what actually is. That psychological shift, from chasing endless possibilities to embracing meaningful commitment, is one of the clearest signs that the eternal child is finally giving way to a mature adult who understands that the richest life is not the one with the most options, but the one lived with the greatest intention. Eventually, something remarkable begins happening that has very little to do with success and everything to do with identity. They stop asking themselves, "What do I feel like doing today?" and begin asking, "Who am I becoming through what I do today?" That single shift changes the entire architecture of the mind. Instead of chasing temporary emotions, they begin building a stable identity. Every action becomes a vote for the kind of man they want to become. Every time they wake up when the alarm rings, they are not just getting out of bed. They are reinforcing the identity of someone who keeps his word. Every time they finish a difficult task, Instead of escaping into distraction, they are telling their brain, "This is who I am now." Behavioral psychologists have repeatedly found that identity-driven habits tend to last much longer than habits built solely on motivation. Motivation rises and falls like the weather. Identity is much more stable. If a person believes, "I'm trying to become disciplined," every difficult day becomes a negotiation. But if he genuinely believes, "I am a disciplined person," his actions naturally begin aligning with that belief. The mind constantly seeks consistency between identity and behavior. This is why changing how you see yourself is often more powerful than changing your schedule. The eternal child, however, usually builds his identity around potential rather than action. He tells himself, "I'm talented, I'm creative, or I could do amazing things if I wanted to." These statements feel comforting because they protect self-esteem without demanding evidence. But adulthood asks a different question. Not what could you become, but what are you repeatedly choosing to become? The uncomfortable truth is that the brain does not measure identity by dreams. It measures identity by repeated behavior. If someone dreams of becoming healthy but consistently neglects their body, the nervous system eventually identifies with avoidance rather than health. If someone dreams of becoming successful but repeatedly postpones meaningful work, the brain slowly accepts procrastination as part of who they are. Fortunately, this process works both ways. Every small act of responsibility becomes evidence that a new identity is possible. At first, the evidence feels insignificant. Making the bed, arriving on time, keeping a promise, completing one difficult task before checking the phone. None of these actions seem life-changing by themselves. Yet together, they begin reshaping the subconscious story a person tells about himself. The man who once believed he lacked discipline gradually begins collecting proof that he is capable of consistency after all. This is why psychologists often encourage focusing on systems instead of outcomes. Outcomes are important, but they are distant. Systems exist today. You cannot immediately become financially secure, physically strong, or emotionally resilient overnight. But you can perform today's habits that make those futures increasingly likely. Ironically, when attention shifts toward the process instead of the result, progress usually accelerates because the mind stops obsessing over how far it still has to go and begins appreciating the momentum it is quietly creating. Another fascinating change begins appearing in the relationship they have with uncertainty. Earlier, uncertainty felt dangerous because it threatened the fantasy of being naturally gifted. Every unfamiliar challenge carried the possibility of discovering limits they did not want to face. But after repeatedly stepping outside their comfort zone, uncertainty gradually loses its emotional charge. Instead of representing danger, it starts representing possibility. They become willing to enter situations where they are not the smartest person in the room. They ask questions without embarrassment. They become students again. And paradoxically, this willingness to appear inexperienced is exactly what allows genuine competence to develop. There is also a noticeable shift in how they respond to criticism. The immature ego experiences criticism as an attack on identity. Even small feedback feels deeply personal because self-worth depends on appearing capable. Mature individuals gradually separate who they are from what they did. A mistake becomes something they made, not something they are. This psychological distinction creates enormous emotional resilience. Instead of defending themselves automatically, they become curious. They ask what can be learned. They recognize that constructive criticism, while uncomfortable, often provides information that self-praise never could. Over time, they begin realizing that adulthood is not defined by age, income, or social status. It is defined by ownership. Ownership of emotions instead of blaming them on circumstances. Ownership of decisions instead of waiting for someone else to decide. Ownership of mistakes instead of searching for excuses. Ownership of time instead of constantly wondering where it disappeared. Every area of life becomes an opportunity to practice this principle. The more ownership they accept, the less powerless they feel. Responsibility no longer appears as something life forces upon them. It becomes the very thing that allows them to shape the direction of their own future. As these habits accumulate month after month and year after year, people around them begin noticing a difference that cannot easily be explained. Their confidence no longer comes from talking about future plans. It comes from the quiet certainty created by repeated action. They speak less about what they intend to do and spend more time actually doing it. Their promises become fewer but more meaningful because they know the value of keeping their word. Gradually, the gap between the person they imagine becoming and the person they are each day begins to disappear, replaced by something far more powerful than fantasy, a life built through consistent choices, patiently repeated until they become character itself. If you've recognized yourself anywhere in this video, don't see it as a reason to feel ashamed. See it as proof that your mind is finally becoming aware of the patterns that have been quietly controlling your life. The eternal child is not your true identity. It is a psychological defense mechanism that once tried to protect you from disappointment, rejection, and failure. But the very thing that once protected you may now be preventing you from becoming the man you're capable of being. The hidden psychology of the man-child teaches us one powerful lesson. Maturity is not something that arrives with age. It is something that is built through responsibility, discipline, emotional honesty, and the willingness to face reality even when it is uncomfortable. Every time you keep a promise, take ownership of a mistake, finish what you started, or choose growth over comfort, you are leaving behind the fantasy of who you hope to become and stepping into the reality of who you are becoming. Remember, life doesn't reward potential, it rewards action. The world is filled with talented people whose gifts were buried beneath procrastination, fear, and endless excuses. At the same time, it is filled with ordinary people who achieved extraordinary things simply because they showed up, stayed consistent, and refused to quit when life became difficult. In the end, your future will never be determined by how much potential you had. It will be determined by how many times you were willing to act, despite fear. So before you leave this video, ask yourself one question that may be uncomfortable, but could change the course of your entire life. Am I protecting my potential, or am I finally putting it to work? Because the answer to that question will reveal whether you're still waiting for the perfect moment, or whether today is the day you finally begin becoming the man you've always imagined. If this video gave you a new perspective on yourself, let me know in the comments. Which psychological trap have you been struggling with the most? Your honesty may encourage someone else who has been silently fighting the same battle. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind human behavior, emotional growth, and the invisible patterns that shape our lives, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to The Psychology Teacher, and join us in the next one. Until then, remember this. Growing up isn't about losing your dreams. It's about becoming strong enough, disciplined enough, and courageous enough to finally make them real.